When you hear the word establishment, what comes to mind? Is it a positive or a negative thing? Is it transparent or secretive? If you had to come up with a list of characteristics that would make someone a member of the British establishment, what would be on that list? How might the concept of the establishment be useful to politicians, given all of these connotations? I'm Michael, and this is State of Mind, the Political Ideas podcast. This summer is going to be a very interesting one in British politics. Tomorrow is the first day of the summer recess. Our new Prime Minister Andy Burnham will take office when the legislative, the law-making function of government is on pause. He will immediately have to appoint a cabinet, and there's been much speculation about who will fill the key role of Chancellor of the Exchequer. The briefing has certainly shifted away from Ed Miliband, seemingly in Shabana Mahmood's favour. But to me this seems to be a strange choice. She hasn't got particular economic experience, and she hasn't even seemed to really express much of an interest in economic policy in the past. Honestly, I thought, given that she's so popular with reform voters in her current brief, that Burnham might keep her in the Home Office, although maybe require her to water down some of her reforms to indefinite leave to remain for care workers. She's certainly seen as competent, and I imagine she won't spook the markets in the same way that Ed Miliband might have. That said, I can't help but feel that John Healey or Yvette Cooper would have been a stronger choice. They're both more experienced in the Treasury, and I don't think either have prime ministerial ambitions, which Mahmood, I think, does. Healey would also send a strong signal about Burnham's commitment to defence, something which is increasingly important as the world becomes more dangerous and old alliances feel more rhetorical than actual. Regardless, tomorrow Burnham will go to see the King, and he'll be appointed Prime Minister. The day will probably move quite quickly from there, with high offices of state being filled first. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Home Secretary, the Foreign Secretary. I would imagine Burnham then focuses on his devolution roles, local government, business, and there are briefings that he's going to create a new economic department, the Department for the Future Economy. If I were advising Burnham, I would then suggest naming his Secretary of State for Defence very early. And in all this, we haven't even mentioned health, education, justice, work and pensions, transport. The point is, the first day is going to be a whirlwind of appointments, and I imagine it will probably be quite a broad reshuffle, with very few people staying in role. He'll want to show a clean break from Starmer and reach out across the Parliamentary Labour Party. At least that's where his rhetoric's been so far. Starmer's approach to Labour Party management may have worked in the wake of the 2019 election loss in opposition, but in government, his inability to reach out across his party and to bring his backbenchers with him was a significant part of his downfall. As such, who Burnham appoints as his chief whip, effectively the Minister for Parliamentary Party Management, will be a very interesting one to watch, especially given that Burnham has talked a big game about not using the parliamentary whipping system to quash debate and avoid scrutiny. But once these appointments have been made, Burnham will not be in a position to start passing legislation to get on with that rewiring of the state he's been promising. How Burnham uses the summer will be really important. He'll need to use the time to prepare a legislative agenda so he can hit the ground running in September when Parliament returns. And at the same time, he'll need to tell a story to the country and not allow there to be a vacuum. And indeed, apparently he plans to tour the UK during the summer, focusing particularly on places where Labour is losing support. All that said, the threat of reform and Farage could be starting to lessen with what has become a humiliating blunder for Farage in calling this by-election. Where I think Farage was hoping to steal some limelight from Burnham over the summer, the other party's decision to not stand in the by-election means media attention on Farage this summer will not be edifying for him, whilst he defends his financial dealings against Count Binface. It is extremely unlikely that Farage will lose this by-election, but truly the damage has already been done. I would imagine turnout will be very low, and for Farage there's a real danger that a low turnout of his supporters, who will either see it as a done thing or be turned off by the whole scandal, will be coupled with a high turnout of the anti-Farage vote coalescing around the parody candidate Count Binface. This could result in a much closer result than many would expect. Indeed, Reform seem to have internally recognised the danger of the moment, moving resources away from the Greater Manchester Mayor by-election towards what should really be a sure thing, the safest Reform seat in the country, with the party leader standing with no serious opposition. When Farage made the unusual declaration that he was stepping down from his seat in order to stand again in his seat, he tried to argue that this election would be the people versus the establishment. In his narrative, the investigation into his financial dealings by the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards, something which was triggered by him failing to declare a £5 million gift from a crypto billionaire in the year prior to being elected, is an establishment stitch-up, and in his narrative, by going to the people, Farage is allowing the people to decide and, crucially, neutralising the threat of a potential recall by-election if he was suspended. The problem is, none of the main parties, not Labour nor the Conservatives, nor the Liberal Democrats, Greens or even Restore, are standing against him. And this truly was a masterful response from all these parties. It effectively neutralises a potential threat by making the whole thing look like a vanity exercise. And that's before we even get to who has emerged as Farage's principal opponent, Count Binface. Britain has a long history of parody candidates, what have in the past effectively been a more pointed way of spoiling your vote. By voting for the monster raving loony party, you are effectively calling the entire exercise of voting for the parties on offer into question. You're making the entire process look bizarre. Usually in elections, these parody candidates only ever get a handful of votes, but every now and then you do get some who break through. Count Binface has genuinely become part of the British political zeitgeist over the last few years, standing in key elections, most recently against Andy Burnham in the Makerfield by-election. The Count offers surreal policies ranging from a promise to build at least one affordable house to a pledge to cap the price of croissants. And he usually caps out around 1% of the vote, but this could all be about to change. Nigel Farage, before the other parties declared their boycott of this by-election, cast the upcoming contest as the people versus the establishment. This is a political instinct of his that has historically worked for him, but this time, given the reason for his investigation and the decision of the other parties not to stand, it really seems to have backfired. Why was Farage so keen to make that the story of the election? What does it even mean to be the establishment? How in the upcoming by-election can Farage claim to be the upstart anti-establishment candidate when his main opponent is a parody of the very election itself, drawing attention to the ridiculousness of Farage trying to evade justice, drawing attention to the many ways in which he is not like the people of Clacton, his constituency where he famously never is. So what does the concept of the establishment even mean in the first place? Well, the fact is, it's quite a slippery concept which can have drastically different definitions depending on your pre-existing political beliefs. Ultimately, the establishment is often a useful term rhetorically for politicians to allude to a long-standing power that they oppose, to imply a shady and all-powerful enemy. To a communist, the establishment might be the financial sector and the market, but to a reactionary conservative, it might be the universities and the civil service. What each of these institutions have in common is their long, established position of power and influence. But which elements of the establishment are drawn attention to by politicians and influencers, as Farage insists he was before being elected, is ultimately going to be shaped by who their opponent is. Because in many ways, and I really mean in many ways, Nigel Farage is a great example of an establishment figure. Let's look at his life and career for a moment. Born to a stockbroker father, Nigel Farage attended Dulwich College, a private school which today charges £20,000 per term for the privilege of being educated there. After leaving school, Farage went to do a very man-of-the-people job. He became a commodities trader, trading in rare metals, before going on to found UKIP over 30 years ago. He's run for Parliament 8 times, with this latest by-election being his 9th, and he served as a member of the European Parliament prior to Brexit. Speaking of Brexit, he had been campaigning for decades for the UK to leave the European Union, and he was successful in that campaign, having a huge impact on the UK's economic and political landscapes. Arguably, Farage is one of the longest-standing representatives of the political establishment, having been in the business with varying levels of success for decades. His first political party, UKIP, the United Kingdom Independence Party, was founded in 1993. Now, to my fellow millennials, the 1990s sounds like the recent past, although I wasn't born yet in 1993, but this was 33 years ago. Since Farage entered UK politics, there have been 9 Prime Ministers, with Burnham being the 10th. Now, I'm sure he would argue that he's always been on the outside, with him only recently making it to Parliament, but with his success in Brexit and the way his political beliefs dominate our discourse, especially now with the emboldening of the far-right speech on social media thanks to the world's richest man, another example by the way of economic establishment power working in Farage's favour, it seems bizarre to me that he is anything but a key actor in British politics, and he has been a key actor in British politics now for many, many years, even if he's never been the Prime Minister or the leader of the opposition. The potential for Farage's political opponents to reverse his accusations of them being the establishment has only grown with the revelations about his earnings, declared or not, legal or not, under investigation or not. How relatable is it to the average Brit to make hundreds of thousands of pounds for a few hours' work as a brand ambassador for a gold bullion company? How relatable is it to be gifted £5 million? Are these the kind of opportunities available to the unestablished, to the recent converts of Reform UK, to the party faithful? Likewise, the way Farage chooses to spend his spare time is hardly of the people. Whilst he tries to cultivate an image of him being the man down the pub with a fag and a pint, we know from various accounts that on the day of Brexit result, he and other senior Brexit campaigners didn't go down the pub, no, they went to a private dining club. Farage, prior to standing in 2024, said he would need £1 million a year to live as an MP. Can you imagine that? That being the amount of money that you'd need to get by in a year, £1 million. What must his lifestyle be like to need £1 million to get through a year? And on top of a £100,000 salary? And how far must his lifestyle be from those whose votes he requires? And as if by magic, after this comment about needing £1 million per year to stand, he is gifted £5 million by a crypto billionaire, and parliamentary terms are typically meant to be, that's right, 4 or 5 years long. And we're meant to believe that by coincidence alone, Farage then decides to stand in Clacton, which he then wins. He uses his time as an MP to spend more time in the USA with his friend, the President of the USA, than he does in Clacton. Which, by the way, is another way it strikes me as bizarre to label Farage as anti-establishment when he is a close political ally of arguably the most powerful political leader in the world. And during that time, when he's been an MP, he's held no local surgeries and hardly shown up in the chamber of the House of Commons. He has, however, worked several additional jobs, including the previously mentioned gold bullion brand ambassador role, alongside many speaking engagements, each of which paid more than many people take home in their yearly salary. So this privately educated multi-millionaire who's been in politics for over 30 years, who's close friends with the presidents of the United States and is actively supported by the world's richest individuals, including the world's richest man and first trillionaire Elon Musk. This man who dines in private dining clubs, stays in luxury apartments near Buckingham Palace and owns multiple high-worth properties. We're to believe that this man who has used his considerable power and influence to attack and demonise his fellow human beings, to redirect people's legitimate anger away from people like himself and towards migrants because it protects himself and his wealth, we are to believe that this man is on the side of the people and not the establishment. Please. You see how the concept of establishment can be a very powerful and emotive way of describing your political enemy, of imbuing them with a sinister longevity, of casting ourselves as the rebel alliance and them as the evil galactic empire. I said when I started this podcast that I wasn't going to pretend to be political neutral, and I'm really not. I don't need to be. My audience can agree or disagree with me. Farage to me is a political opponent, and I fundamentally disagree with his policy platform, and I find his rhetoric to be purposely designed to inflame tensions and divide people. And for me, as an opponent of Farage, to be able to describe him as part of the establishment could prove a powerful tool for uniting people against him. Farage has used his position as an anti-establishment figure to great success in the past. but the increased level of sustained scrutiny into his financial dealings that he's about to receive, coupled with the fact that his is the only major party standing in Clacton, with his principal opponent being a bin, it is really difficult to see him as anything but the establishment candidate. Farage truly could have been foisted by his own petard. In setting up the narrative of this election as the people versus the establishment, he has exposed himself, and really, win or lose, the damage is done. He simply doesn't look as serious as he used to, and I would imagine this whole escapade will impact his popularity even further with the average voter, and crucially, many former Tory and Labour voters who may have been leaning reform, but now may opt not to vote or may return back to those parties. And the potential humiliation of Binface coming close or even winning could truly be the finishing blow to Farage's political career. Clearly something he and those around him recognise, given that they are diverting resources, money and activists away from Manchester and towards Clacton. So make no bones about it, if Farage goes, there is no one in the reform with the public appeal and celebrity draw that could replace him. Much like the USA, where I'm confident MAGA will lose influence fast in a post-Trump environment, I simply cannot see a generic Braverman or Yusuf-led Reform UK that is anywhere near as successful as the Farage-led one. As I say, this is going to be a very interesting political summer, and I look forward to continuing to analyse the big events of the next few weeks and the big ideas behind it all. I've been Michael, and this has been State of Mind, the Political Ideas podcast. Thank you so much for listening to State of Mind, the Political Ideas podcast. New episodes will be releasing every other Sunday, and you can find these on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. The podcast also has a YouTube page, a TikTok page, and an Instagram page where I post much faster paced short videos, so go and check those out. You can find the Instagram at state_of_mind_podcast, YouTube at podcast.stateofmind, and TikTok at state.of.mind.podcast. I would really appreciate it if you could follow the podcast in all those places and like and share what I put out. I've really enjoyed the process of researching, writing and producing this podcast, and I would love for it to reach as many people as possible. Anyway, that's enough for me for now. Again, thank you so much for tuning in to episode 3. I've been Michael, and this has been State of Mind, the Political Ideas podcast.